They laughed when she walked into the boardroom, just a secretary with a kid in tow, but in the middle of a crumbling $80 million 0-cents deal, her 8-year-old son raised his hand, and in one sentence, exposed the flaw their experts had missed. What began as condescension turned into shock, and then something no one saw coming. This is the story of a single mom, her brilliant son, and the moment that changed everything. The conference room on the 53rd second floor of Sterling Core's glass tower buzzed with anxiety. A dozen executives in tailored suits hunched over glowing tablets and whispering laptops, eyes darting from projections to each other. At the head of the table, the lead negotiator's voice cracked as he updated the board on the collapsing deal, a multi-country logistics merger worth 80 million United States dollars. One wrong clause, one misunderstood number, one breath too slow, and the whole thing could disappear. Graham Sterling, the CEO, stood like a statue near the window, backlit by the golden haze of San Francisco's late afternoon. In his signature black suit and navy shirt, he looked as calm as ever, but his silence was loaded. No one wanted to be the next person to speak, not until they knew whether the next word would trigger a financial implosion. The doors swung open. Heads turned. A woman stepped inside, her chin raised, her dark curls tied in a no-nonsense ponytail. Her dress was plain, pressed, but ordinary. She did not look like anyone from finance, legal, or analytics. In her hand was the smaller hand of a child. A boy, perhaps 8 years old, wore jeans, a button-up shirt with one button slightly crooked, and a backpack with a solar system patch peeling at the corner. The murmurs began immediately, a few chuckles. One executive leaned back and smirked. Another whispered, "Is that Sterling's new intern?" Graham's face barely shifted. "This is not a daycare," he said coldly. The woman did not blink. "Good," she replied, her voice even but firm. "Because he is not here to play." Someone stifled a laugh. She guided the boy to a chair. He set his backpack down, pulled out a worn notepad and a mechanical pencil, and then calmly reached for the remote to scroll through the slides being projected on the large screen. The executives fell into stunned silence. Slide after slide, forecast tables, projections, conversion paths. The boy leaned forward, his eyes wide and brown beneath slightly oversized glasses, scanned the data like someone watching cartoons. Then he turned to the room. "I am sorry," he said gently, "but your cost model is broken." A few executives exchanged incredulous looks. "Excuse me?" someone said. The boy pointed at a line of projected metrics on the screen. "You are applying linear growth on an exponential curve. That is why your Q3 numbers flatten, and that is why the partner in Singapore is hesitating. Their forecast sees through it." Silence. The woman looked straight at Graham. "I told him he could speak. You said you needed clarity." Graham slowly walked toward the screen, gaze fixed on the line the boy had referenced. His face was unreadable, his jaw tightened slightly. Then he turned back to the room. "Can anyone here explain why he is wrong?" No one moved. The boy sat still, legs swinging gently under the chair, not fidgeting, not smug, just waiting. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the city skyline. Inside, a billion-dollar empire pivoted around the quiet voice of a child. And not a single person in the room laughed anymore. 2 weeks before the boardroom meeting that would make headlines, the world of Rachel Vega looked very different. Quieter, humbler, but no less extraordinary. Her mornings began in a cracked-tile kitchen, where the coffee machine sputtered like a tired engine and the fridge door made a groaning sound if you opened it too wide. Outside the window, the Oakland skyline shimmered in the rising sun, casting golden light across the modest one-bedroom apartment she shared with her son. Rachel, 33 years old, brushed a few stray strands of dark hair into her ponytail, tugged on a cardigan that had been washed one too many times, and stepped into the tight rhythm of her day. She was beautiful in the way some women are when they stop trying to impress anyone. Sharp cheekbones, a soft mouth always on the verge of a wry smile, and eyes that looked like they had stories she never had time to tell. Once upon a time, she had dreams. In high school, she had been valedictorian, first in her class, a scholarship to study finance at Stanford. Her professors once said she had a Wall Street mind in a Main Street body. Numbers came easily. Forecasts made sense to her the way some people understood music. Then life happened. Halfway through her third year of college, she got pregnant. The father, a classmate, with charm but no spine, vanished before Eli was born. Rachel dropped out, moved back to Oakland, and started piecing together a different kind of future. These days, she worked mornings as an administrative assistant at a downtown law firm, answering phones, managing schedules, handling things no one else noticed. In the evenings, she took on private tutoring gigs, mostly math, high schoolers, community college students, sometimes the kids of lawyers she worked for, always on time, always smiling. She never complained. Her apartment was clean, though small. The living room doubled as her son's bedroom. Eli's drawings covered the fridge, planets, rocket ships, graphs with color-coded bars. His handwriting was still a child's, uneven and loopy, but the content was startling. At 6 years old, he had asked for multiplication puzzles instead of bedtime stories. By 8, he was rearranging budget spreadsheets just for fun. Eli was different. He wore glasses slightly too big for his face, and his dark brown curls stuck up no matter how much water Rachel used to flatten them. He talked to numbers like they were people. Once, when a tutoring client left behind a binder full of financial statements, Eli had flipped through them with the excitement most kids reserved for comic books. "Why do they think these expenses are variable?" he asked once. "This is clearly fixed overhead. They are lying to themselves." Rachel had blinked. "You are 8. "I am not wrong," he replied calmly, and he was not. They never used the word genius, not out loud. That word carried pressure, expectations, and rooms where kids like Eli were either labeled or exploited. Instead, Rachel called him my little telescope. "EMOF?" he asked once. "Because you help me see things more clearly," she said. At school, he kept to himself. Teachers said he was quiet, polite, and sometimes too serious. He hated PE, but loved group projects, if only to fix what the other kids misunderstood. Their life was not glamorous. They did not take vacations. Most of Eli's clothes came from thrift stores, but their world was full of love, curiosity, and banter. Rachel made jokes while folding laundry. Eli lectured on inflation while brushing his teeth. She teased him about charging consulting fees. He teased her about not raising her prices for tutoring. They were a team, an odd, brilliant, warm little team. What Rachel never expected was that one day her son would walk into a skyscraper full of suits and change everything. And not for a moment did she doubt that he could. Some bruises never show. They hide behind practiced smiles, behind no worries and "I'm fine," and "maybe next time." Rachel Vega had become a master of swallowing pride in public and letting it ache only when no one could see. At the law firm where she worked, Rachel was technically an administrative assistant. She made copies, filtered calls, handled billing systems, and sent gentle calendar nudges that kept 6 high-strung attorneys from missing court appearances. But she also saw inefficiencies in their software, noticed redundancies in how clients were billed, and even corrected an error in the firm's payroll spreadsheet that could have resulted in a massive tax fine. "You should go into systems consulting," the junior accountant had whispered once. Rachel smiled. "I do, unofficially, for $0 per hour." But when she suggested a way to streamline invoicing during a staff meeting, the office manager cut her off mid-sentence. "Rachel, let us stay focused, please." Then came the silence. The kind of silence that wraps around a woman who knows she is right, but also knows no one in that room is going to say so. She returned to her desk. She filed the memos. She shut her mouth again. At Eli's school, it was not much better. Her son had the unfortunate habit of being both correct and unafraid. During a third-grade math lesson, the teacher wrote a long equation on the whiteboard and arrived at the wrong conclusion. Every student copied the mistake into their notebooks, except Eli. He raised his hand, politely. "That is incorrect," he said, his voice steady. "The distributive property does not apply that way. If you use it here, the answer should be -8, not 2. The teacher stared at him. "Eli," she said through clenched teeth, "this is not your turn to teach the class." Later in a parent meeting, the same teacher would call Eli disruptive and too rigid. "Him needs to learn humility," she said. Rachel bit her tongue hard enough to taste blood. "He needs a teacher who does not confuse authority with accuracy," she wanted to say. But she did not. Not that time. She thanked the teacher, took the pamphlet for emotional adjustment resources, went home. She cried that night, in the car parked outside their building, one hand over her mouth, the other gripping the steering wheel. Eli saw the redness in her eyes the next morning. He said nothing, just handed her a sticky note that read, "You are the smartest person in every room. They just do not know it yet." She put it in her wallet. Then came the networking event. A friend of a friend had invited her to a tech mixer. Startups, investors, engineers. Rachel wore her nicest dress, a navy sheath she had gotten from a second-hand store, and tailored herself. Her makeup was light but confident. Her heels clicked like she belonged. She circled the room with poise, picked up on tech lingo fast, found herself at a booth demoing a finance app. The product had a glitch. Numbers from certain tax zones were getting misfiled due to inconsistent API logic. The engineer said they were still troubleshooting. Rachel leaned in, offered a potential fix. "Have you tried running the location variable through a secondary parser before it hits the main logic gate? It sounds like a sequencing issue." The silence was instant. The lead tech guy blinked. "You are a secretary?" he asked flatly. She nodded, still smiling. "Yes, but I used to study finance and systems." He laughed, cold and performative. "Well, thanks for your input, but we will leave this one to the engineers." She nodded, stepped back, took her free drink, and walked away. 3 hours later, in the parking lot, she screamed into her steering wheel. It was not that she thought she belonged in those rooms, it was that she knew she did, and they never even looked at her long enough to see it. Later that night, curled on the couch with Eli, watching reruns of a math-based cartoon, she let out a tired sigh. Eli turned to her, his eyes wide behind his glasses. "Why do people treat you like you are not magic?" She chuckled through her sore throat. "Because they do not see the cape." Eli frowned. "They will." Rachel kissed the top of his curly head. "Maybe one day." Neither of them knew that day was already on its way. Sterling Core Ventures was built on control, precision, discipline. At least that was what the press said. Behind the glass walls of its downtown San Francisco headquarters, power hummed in the air. Everything was steel and glass and silence. Even the light felt filtered, polished. At the top of it all sat Graham Sterling. At 40 years old, he had already become a fixture on magazine covers and keynote stages. His tailored suits were as sharp as his strategies. His voice never rose. His face rarely changed. He was the kind of man who made boardrooms fall quiet with a glance. He was also very, very angry. But no one could tell, not unless they noticed the subtle clinch in his jaw as he stared at the 4 massive monitors in his corner office. Not unless they heard the slight edge in his clipped voice as he repeated the same phrase for the 3rd time that hour. "This number does not make sense." The number in question was buried in a financial model tied to an international expansion deal, an $80 million partnership with a Singapore-based cloud conglomerate. For months, Sterling Core had been laying the groundwork, navigating time zones, tax codes, regional compliance models, and legacy systems. It was meant to be a crown jewel in their next quarter. The press had already drafted the headlines. But something had shifted. Somewhere between the audit trails and foreign revenue calculations, a discrepancy had emerged. Not massive, less than 1.5% off in projections, but enough to make their overseas partners stall. Enough to make Graham Sterling stop sleeping. "Pull the full ledger again," he said without looking up. "We already did, sir," his lead analyst stammered. "3 times. Graham's eyes were steel. "Then pull it a fourth." Outside his office, the analytics division was in chaos. Half the team had not gone home in 36 hours. Pizza boxes piled up beside whiteboards covered in formulas and flowcharts. Tension crackled like static. No one wanted to be the person who told Graham Sterling that they could not find the answer. Inside his office, the air was colder. He sat alone, rolling a pen between his fingers. His mind moved fast, faster than most people could keep up with, but for the first time in a long time, he felt stuck. The inconsistency was not just a typo, not a data entry error. Something was structurally off in the way the numbers were behaving under their new forecasting model. And no one, not even his most trusted data scientist, could tell him why. He pulled up the latest internal report, scanned it, then scanned it again. It felt like a puzzle missing one piece, just one. 72 hours, he muttered to himself. That was all they had. The deal was contingent on full financial transparency. If they could not account for the missing variance, the Singapore firm would pull out. $80 million, gone, overnight. Graham leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and counted backward from 10. It was a trick his old therapist had taught him years ago, back when his brother died and his whole life had collapsed into grief and grit. 10, 9, 8. He had built this company out of that collapse. He had clawed his way out of pain and turned it into something indestructible. Or so he thought. 7, 6, 5. Now here he was, trapped by a number, haunted by the possibility that the empire he had built so carefully could be undone by a tiny ripple in a spreadsheet. 4, 3, 2. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. Another buzz. He grabbed it. It was a calendar reminder. Partners Summit Final Pre-A Review. Today, 3 o'clock, no delays. He stood slowly, straightened his sleeves, looked at his reflection in the glass. Perfect on the outside. Cracking beneath. 1. The pressure inside Sterling Core Ventures had reached a fever pitch. Graham Sterling stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling screen in his executive conference suite, arms crossed, jaw tight. Rows of transaction histories and internal chat logs flashed before him. Behind him, department heads sat stiffly in leather chairs, each one pretending to breathe normally. "What you are looking at," Graham said, "is a pattern, a deliberate one." The room was silent. "We have been compromised." It started subtly. A client's proprietary forecast model leaked before the launch. Then, 2 overseas partners received competitor offers mirroring Sterling Core's exact terms. Too exact. At first, Graham thought it was coincidence. Then a competitor published an op-ed analyzing Sterling's platform metrics, figures only someone inside the company could have known. Graham's security lead, a woman with a background in digital forensics, quietly confirmed the worst. Someone had accessed restricted finance folders without clearance. Someone had been downloading sensitive data at odd hours, from devices that should not have had that level of access. "It is not just numbers anymore," Graham muttered to his CTO. "It is intent." The board was livid. Several demanded an independent investigation. One even accused Graham of mishandling internal safeguards, suggesting his famously ruthless delegation had backfired. "They want to see you bleed for this," the CTO said softly, after the call ended. But Graham was already 10 steps ahead. "This is not just theft," he said. "It is orchestration." His theory: a mole had been planted. Not a disgruntled junior analyst or an ambitious VP gone rogue, but someone placed intentionally, likely by a rival firm that had been circling Sterling Core's patent innovations for over a year. He reviewed hiring files, audit trails, message logs. The deeper he dug, the more tangled the puzzle became. Who could he trust? Not his finance team, not his IT engineers, not even the assistant who scheduled his meetings. For the first time in his career, Graham Sterling found himself surrounded by brilliance, and yet completely alone. And while chaos reigned upstairs, on a lower floor in a separate building, a quiet anomaly was unfolding. Rachel Vega, still in her faded cardigan and clearance heels, sat in a contractor cubicle at one of Sterling's third-party partner firms, sorting through database errors that others had written off as software noise. To her, they were anything but noise. She had taken the side gig cleaning up metadata tables for extra income, not knowing they were linked to one of Sterling Core's satellite systems. As she reviewed user behavior models and data logs, she noticed strange duplications, records overwritten at identical timestamps, originating from conflicting device IDs. The anomalies were too systematic to be random. She flagged them, added commentary, and color-coded her spreadsheet. Then, out of curiosity or instinct, she created a private log of her own. Someone is hiding something, she murmured to herself, scrolling through the data. Eli, sitting beside her on the floor with a puzzle book, looked up. Is it like a math thief? Rachel grinned. Exactly like that. Back at headquarters, Graham leaned against the conference table, pinching the bridge of his nose. We need someone who sees what we are missing, he said to his chief of operations. Someone who does not think like us. His COO shrugged. You mean someone from outside? Graham paused. Yes, someone no one would expect. He did not know it yet, but that someone was about to walk through his doors, with an 8-year-old holding her hand, and a sentence that would change everything. It was nearly midnight. Rachel sat hunched over her chipped second-hand laptop, a spreadsheet open beside a bowl of overcooked noodles. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of traffic outside and the occasional soft thump of Eli flipping a book page on the couch. She squinted at the screen, scrolling through data logs for the finance partner she worked for. The report was a draft projection sent to Sterling Core for review. Something about it felt off. The numbers were technically correct, but they did not make sense. The trends were skewing too optimistically. Forecasted growth was ballooning without a clear baseline shift. Rachel ran a quick check, retracing the model's steps, when a small voice behind her said, why are they averaging cumulative values? She turned, blinking. What? Eli slid off the couch, patted over in his socks, and pointed to the formula on her screen. See, that part. You cannot average things that are already like summaries of other things. It makes the whole thing double count. Rachel froze. He was right. They were averaging already weighted means across rolling quarters, which inflated the trend line. It was a fundamental modeling error, and one that no one had caught, not the analysts, not the algorithm, not the senior team. Just her son, with crumbs on his pajama sleeve and a gummy bear stuck to his hair. Oh my God, Rachel muttered, clicking through the Excel logic tree. Oh my actual God. The more she verified, the more stunned she became. Eli had unraveled a major flaw in a matter of seconds. She looked at him. You are unbelievable. He shrugged. It was annoying me. Rachel hesitated, then pulled up her email draft. She was only a contractor, barely a name on the spreadsheet, but she could not unsee what she now knew. She attached a corrected version of the model, added a polite explanation, and hit send. No subject line, just possible error in forecast logic, please verify. She forgot about it by morning. Until 2 days later, she received a reply. A short, formal message from someone at Sterling Core's headquarters. 3 words. Who did this? 2 hours later, Rachel sat in a glass-walled conference room on the 23rd floor of Sterling's downtown building. Graham Sterling entered without a word, flanked by 2 senior advisors. He wore a navy suit that looked like it cost more than Rachel's rent, and had the kind of posture that made everyone else feel like they were slouching. If anything, trying to look thrilled and happy. He glanced at her, then at the child beside her. "You brought your son?" he asked, neutral. Rachel smiled faintly. "He is the reason we are here." Graham raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" He motioned toward the whiteboard. "Explain what you found." Rachel looked at Eli. The 8-year-old stepped forward calmly, adjusted his glasses, and picked up a dry erase marker. He was not intimidated. Not by suits, not by ceilings, not by billions. He underlined a single equation on the slide. "You are averaging over already weighted means," he said matter-of-factly. "It makes your forecast implode, because when you average something that already accounts for previous data, the new result pretends growth is doubling when it is actually flat, so your model lies." The room fell dead silent. No one moved. The senior financial officer blinked. Graham stared at the whiteboard, then at the boy. "Who are you?" he asked slowly. Ellie glanced back at his mom. "I am Ellie Vega, and I like numbers." Rachel swallowed her nerves and added, "We were not trying to interfere, we just saw something." Graham studied the boy, then nodded, not condescending, not amused, genuinely impressed. He looked at his team. "Scrap the old model, use theirs." One of the analysts protested. "Sir, that would take—" Graham held up a hand. "Then get started." He turned to Rachel. "I want you both here, tomorrow, and bring that spreadsheet." Rachel blinked. "You mean, for what?" Graham almost smiled. "To save an $80 million deal." The office now had a new rhythm. Rachel came in twice a week under a quiet, short-term contract listed only as an external data consultant. It was a label that made her laugh, technically true, though no one said it aloud that her 8-year-old son was the real engine behind the insights. Graham Sterling kept it discreet. He said it was to avoid headlines. In truth, he did not want Eli treated like a mascot or Rachel like a fluke. He wanted the work to speak first. Eli, of course, had no interest in formalities. He brought his sketchpad and dry erase markers, happily scribbling probability trees and Venn diagrams on any whiteboard left unguarded. Most of the team thought he was just Rachel's quirky kid, until they realized his doodles mirrored problems they were still struggling to crack. One afternoon, as the office buzzed with urgency around finalizing documents for a cross-border licensing deal, Eli wandered into the analytics bullpen, eyes drifting toward the team's activity monitor, a color-coded wall of real-time communication metrics. He tilted his head. "Mom," he whispered later, tugging on Rachel's sleeve as she reviewed database queries on her borrowed laptop. "Do emails usually peak in a time zone that is not ours?" Rachel blinked. Eli pointed at a printout of timestamp data on her desk. "That guy's replies always spike at weird hours, but not weird if you lived in, like, Berlin." Rachel frowned. She checked the logs. The addresses matched an internal account, but the patterns did not. Every night between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the morning Pacific Standard Time, a surge of encrypted messages were sent to a server that pinged through 4 different proxy points. It was elaborate, hidden in plain sight, and suspicious as hell. She brought it to Graham quietly. His face turned cold. Within 48 hours, cybersecurity isolated the trail. A senior vice president of global strategy had been funneling sensitive deal data to a rival firm based in Munich. It had been going on for months. Subtle changes, under-the-radar tweaks in project allocations, carefully engineered doubts that sowed internal chaos. A perfect act of sabotage. Until Eli noticed a statistical rhythm that did not belong. When Graham called Rachel and Eli into his office the next morning, the look on his face was not just relief, it was awe. "How?" he asked simply. Rachel shrugged. "He likes patterns." Graham turned to Eli, crouching slightly to meet his gaze. "Do you know what you just did?" Eli nodded solemnly. "You almost got hacked. That is bad for shareholders." Graham let out a stunned laugh. It was probably the first time anyone had heard him laugh in months. Security protocols were updated. The VP was escorted out, quietly but firmly. Legal handled the rest. And Rachel? She received an offer for a more permanent role, one with a title this time, Director of Process Integrity. Graham said he wanted someone who saw the seams before they split. Eli became a bit of a legend among the analysts, though Rachel made sure he still did his homework before drawing matrix algorithms on the office windows. That night, after a quiet dinner in the executive lounge, Graham lingered as Rachel sipped her tea. "You do not seem surprised," he said. She looked at him. "I am a mother. We are trained to expect sabotage from the universe." He chuckled. "Still, you were the one person no one saw coming." "The one person I did not see coming?" Rachel tilted her head. "Do you always talk like a press release?" Graham cracked another rare smile. "Only when I am nervous." "Hey Mal, are you nervous?" "Because I am beginning to trust someone." Rachel blinked. It was not flirtation. It was something else, something rarer. Respect, recognition, and the quiet weight of shared truth. She set down her cup. "Well, I guess we both have a thing for anomalies." Eli from the corner piped up without looking up from his tablet. "That means she likes you." They both burst into surprised laughter. The deal closed at 9:37 in the morning on a Thursday. Sterling Core Ventures, after weeks of teetering on the edge of collapse, secured the $80 million United States dollar partnership with its Singapore affiliate. The contract was airtight. The projections, now corrected, showed long-term gains and stabilized forecasts. Investor confidence surged. The boardroom was packed. Executives, analysts, legal advisors, and financial consultants, all dressed in pristine suits and cautiously optimistic expressions. Graham Sterling entered last, as always, calm as a storm on pause. But what came next was unexpected. Instead of launching directly into numbers, Graham adjusted the cuffs of his navy blue blazer and motioned toward the back of the room. Rachel Vega stepped inside, hair softly pinned, dressed in a simple but sharp pencil skirt and emerald blouse that matched her quiet confidence. Her son Eli walked beside her, wearing a small navy blazer too big for his shoulders and clutching a graphing calculator like a toy. The room fell awkwardly silent. A few of the older executives looked away, recognizing her instantly, the same woman they had dismissed, the same boy they once whispered about. A few exchanged glances. Someone coughed. Graham stood at the head of the table. "You laughed," he said calmly, "when she brought her son into this room." Dead silence. "You thought it was a joke, a distraction. You even questioned her professionalism. But that boy saved your projections, saved this deal, saved your reputations." He looked toward Eli. "Helm saw what our analysts missed, twice, and his mother, who this company once passed over for her job title, she held this ship together through sheer clarity and grit." Applause erupted, not all at once, but like a ripple, building from one end of the table and spreading until even the most skeptical executive was clapping. Rachel blinked, stunned. Eli looked up at her with a smirk. "Told you, you are the smartest person here." After the meeting, Graham pulled her aside. "We would like to make it official," he said, handing her a clean, cream-colored envelope. "Director of Strategic Insight, full benefits, full pay, no need to prove anything." Rachel took the envelope but looked at him instead. "And the title of honorary math monster? That stays with me?" Graham grinned. "That is permanent." Later that week, a reporter from a major tech magazine requested an exclusive interview. The story had leaked. A single mother and her child had helped save an $80 million United States dollar tech deal. The angle was irresistible. Rachel declined. Her reason? "The only headline I need," she said, "is my son smiling." Still, changes rippled quietly. An anonymous donation appeared at the Bay Area Gifted Mentorship Foundation with a note that simply said, "For the kid who sees what grown-ups miss." Eli was enrolled in their elite mentorship track. No fanfare, no press, just quiet opportunity. That evening, as they sat on the couch in their small apartment, Eli curled against her shoulder, tablet in hand. Rachel opened the envelope one more time. Inside was not only her contract, but a handwritten note from Graham. It read, "You did not just save my company. You reminded me why I built it in the first place." She folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her drawer, next to Eli's kindergarten drawings. Some recognitions did not need billboards. Some legacies were measured in trust earned, not fame gained. And for the first time in a long time, Rachel Vega felt what she had not dared believe was possible. Seen, valued, and exactly where she was meant to be. 1 year later, Rachel Vega stood beneath the blooming arch of bougainvillea in a quiet courtyard garden overlooking the San Francisco Bay. The breeze was soft, the air thick with lavender and laughter. Fairy lights twinkled above as guests gathered in hushed awe. Today she was not in a blazer or scrubs. She wore a sleek ivory dress that hugged her figure gently, elegant without effort. Her dark hair cascaded in soft waves, and her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with something deeper. Peace, joy, belonging. Across from her stood Graham Sterling, no longer just the CEO known for icy precision. His tie was slightly askew, his expression unapologetically tender. Between them stood Eli, now 9, proudly serving as ring-bearer, best man, and flower boy all at once. Rachel turned to him before the vows began. "You good, lovebug?" Eli adjusted his tiny bow tie. "You both are weird, but also statistically lucky, so I guess this works." Laughter rippled through the small crowd. Friends, colleagues, and the few family members they trusted to understand this unusual love story. As Graham took Rachel's hands, the officiant began, but he interrupted gently. "May I say something first?" He looked directly at Rachel. "I have built companies, I have brokered billion-dollar deals, I have survived boardroom wars, but I have never built anything more worthwhile than the life we are starting right now." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "That is very CEO of you." He smiled. "Well, I did try to put it in a PowerPoint." When it was her turn, she reached into her dress pocket and pulled out a crumpled eviction notice. The guests gasped. "This," she said, holding it up, "was the day everything broke, but also the day everything began. You met me at my worst, Graham, not as a profile on LinkedIn, not as someone with perfect credentials, but as a mother, desperate, stubborn, and still trying to make something beautiful for my son." Her voice cracked. "And you did not just see me. You stayed." They exchanged rings, simple engraved bands with 3 words inside: trust, choice, wonder. As the ceremony ended, the crowd cheered. Eli launched biodegradable confetti into the air like he was deploying a weather system. Later, at the reception, which was held on the rooftop of the same building where Rachel once worked as a low-level assistant, something poetic unfolded. Her old boss, now retired, arrived unannounced. "I just came to say, I misjudged you," the woman said. "You were always more than your title." Rachel gave her a warm, firm handshake. "I already knew that, but thank you." That night, under the stars, Rachel and Graham danced slowly on the rooftop. No one was watching. Except Eli, who was too busy trying to calculate how many steps were needed for a complete loop around the buffet table. Rachel leaned into Graham's shoulder. "Did you ever think your whole empire would be saved by a secretary and a kid with big glasses?" He chuckled. "Honestly? No. But I am the luckiest man alive." She pulled back to look at him. "Correction, we both are. Sometimes the smartest person in the room is the one society refuses to see. Sometimes the future is not written in investor reports, but in crayon sketches and whispered questions at bedtime. And sometimes love arrives not in grand declarations, but in quiet, steady belief. Did this story move you? We would love to hear your thoughts. Tell us where in the world you are watching from. We read every comment. And do not forget to subscribe for more soul-stirring stories, love stories, and emotional stories that remind us, sometimes the smallest voices change the biggest rooms.